Hola, soy Vicky del Príncipe Center otra vez. Hope you've been practicing your Spanish, getting to grips with verbs, etc. I know the biggest problem is finding somewhere to actually speak it. Sometimes, even if you live in Spain, it can be quite difficult finding somewhere to go and practice Spanish. You have to go a little bit out of your comfort zone, I think. Obviously, loads of people speak Spanish. We're in Spain, but you perhaps have to go to places that you wouldn't normally go to outside of the expat community and really make an effort to speak Spanish. If you're elsewhere in the world, I think you've probably got more opportunity. But as we're as English speakers, it can be a problem for us that English is so common throughout the world, because this means that wherever we go, somebody probably speaks English. However, of course, Spanish is one of the biggest languages throughout the world as well. So basically, if you can speak Spanish and English, you can really go anywhere and speak to anyone. So that's always useful. But yeah, don't be frightened of going out and practicing. Just get out there, have a go. Don't be scared of getting it wrong. You will get it wrong lots of times before you get it right. That's just the way it is. Nobody just opens their mouth and speaks perfect Spanish. To me, it's about communication, not about perfection. You know, most people, they're not necessarily studying Spanish to do a degree in Spanish. They just want to communicate because, for whatever reason, because they live in a Spanish-speaking country, or they need it for work, or etc., etc. But put your basis on communication and not on perfection, because that just will not happen, unfortunately. Eventually, hopefully. Okay, so today, anyway, I'm digressing, but in today's video, what I want to talk about are actually making questions. That actually is relevant to what we're saying about making conversations and getting out there and speaking, because the only way you can sustain a conversation is by asking questions. So it's okay if you can just answer when someone asks you a question, but what happens when you want to ask a question? And asking questions can be quite difficult in Spanish for the only reason that it's so different from the way we make questions in English. It's actually easier, but that's what makes it difficult, if that makes sense, because you'll see as we go on to make questions, they're so much shorter than English questions that we make in English. It doesn't feel right at first until you get the hang of it. So basically, the question words, first of all. If you have the Break the Language Barrier Level 1 book, your question words are on page 33. So we have que, which is what, como, how, also in some circumstances what as well, cuando, when, por qué, why, quien, who, and donde, where. One perhaps that's missing from there is cual, C-U-A-L, which is which. So we could perhaps add that to help us make more questions. Okay, so when we make a question in Spanish, let's take a question in English first, because it's always a good idea to understand how we make them in English before we start looking at how we make them in Spanish. In English, we quite often add an extra verb to make a question. For example, where do you live? Now, do is just a helper verb, an auxiliary verb. It means nothing. It's just there to make the question. Where do you live? Now, in Spanish, you wouldn't say that. You would just say where you live. So there's no auxiliary verbs in that sense. And the you will be in the ending on the verb. So if you've seen my tutorials on verb endings, the you is integrated into the verb, so you don't even need to say you. So you're saying where you live, but the you and the live is together, so you will end up with just a two-word sentence. So that's important to remember. No do's in the question. and you don't need to say the person if it's clear who the person is. So to explain this a bit better, I'm going back to a previous tutorial, but it doesn't matter because if you haven't seen it, because I'll explain it during this as well. But we learnt some AR verbs, we conjugated some AR verbs, and then we made sentences using the AR verbs. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to imagine that those sentences were answers to a question, and what we'll be looking at is how we would make the question that leads to that answer. So for example, numero uno, which was they play the guitar, tocan la guitarra, we need to think, how would we make a question that would fit that as an answer? Well, we might say, what do they play? So in English, what do they play? 4 words. In Spanish, we just take what, que, take the verb to play, tocar, put the ending on for they, which is an, and that's it. Que tocan. 2 words. So, que tocan? Tocan la guitarra. Then numero dos, the answer, if you like, was she practices every day. So the question might be, when does she practice? So we take the question word when, cuando. Does she practice? All in one word, practica. Cuando practica. You might want to add the ella just to make it clear it's she rather than he, because practica could be when does he practice. So cuando practica, practica cada día. Por ejemplo, he prepares the contract. Que prepara. What does he prepare? Carlos is wearing trousers and a t-shirt, so we might ask, what is Carlos wearing? Que lleva Carlos? Número 5, I work in a bank. If that's the answer, the question might be, where do you work? ¿Dónde trabajas? We always sing in the bath, a bit strange, but the question might be, where do you sing? Where do yous sing, plural? ¿Dónde cantáis? Número 7, yous, plural, walk to the school. The question might be, how do you get to the school? ¿Cómo llegáis a la escuela? Número 8, I dance every Saturday. The question might be, when do you dance? ¿Cuándo bailas? She is looking for her dog. Busca su perro. The question might be, ¿qué busca? We study Spanish in El Príncipe. Número 10. We study Spanish at El Príncipe. The question might be, where do you study Spanish? ¿Dónde estudiáis español? Número 11, I buy meat in the supermarket. Where do you buy meat? Might be the question. ¿Dónde compras carne? Compro carne en el supermercado. He listens to the radio every day. The question might be, when does he listen to the radio? So, ¿cuándo escucha la radio? Escucha la radio cada día, or todos los días. They arrive on Friday. The question might be, when do they arrive? So, ¿cuándo llegan? Llegan el viernes. You are waiting for the bus. The question might be, what am I waiting for? I mean, they can be a bit silly, but it's just to practice the verb. So, ¿qué espero? What am I waiting for? Esperas el autobús. You're waiting for the bus. I look at the house, número 15, which is miro la casa. So the question might be, ¿qué miras? What are you looking at? That's quite a handy thing you might want to say to somebody one day. ¿Qué miras? Miro la casa. Okay, so good. So remember, with questions, short but sweet, no auxiliary verbs, no helper verbs. Spanish is a very direct language, so it's actually easier to make a question once you realise how it works. I call it the click. Once you get the click, you think, oh, this is easy. But in the beginning, it's so easy, it's difficult. Okay, ya está. Hope you understand questions a little bit more. Again, as always, if you want me to cover anything in particular in a video, let me know and I'll be happy to do it. If you found the video useful, give me a thumbs up. If you want to receive instant notification of future videos, press the subscribe button at the bottom. And if you do want to buy the Break the Language Barrier series of books, they're all available on the website or on Amazon. And you don't need them to follow the videos, and you don't need the videos to follow the book, but they do complement each other. So all the books, there are 4 levels, 1 to 4, and they all have the answer key included in the back. Ok, ya está. Vale, muchas gracias. Hasta luego.